So I picked up this Timken rebuild kit, and it looks like it's got everything I'm gonna need. Comes with some gasket maker. I've got some green stuff that I've used in the past that I might use instead of this, but we'll see. Gear marking, compound. Kind of cute, it comes with a little bit of thread locker as well. And then it's got all the bearings and races. What I was really interested in, it's also got the seal, the pinion seal, but it's also got all the shims as well, and a new pinion nut. So all Timken bearings. Pretty excited to start getting it put back together. So to set backlash and pinion depth on these axles, the recommendation is to use the shims that were in there initially, and then work from that. The difficulty with this particular Dana 70 is where the shims are. So these are the pinion depth shims, and they, for example, go in here, and then the race goes in here. So I have two axles. I've got the one over here that came out of the truck, and then the one that I'm going to be putting into the truck. So I had a chance to actually knock two of these races out. And even though the second time I tried to be careful, both times I damaged some of the shims. Let me just show you here. Damaged some of the edges of the shims, like you can see there. So I didn't want to be knocking the race in and out multiple times as I'm checking pinion depth. I saw some people on YouTube who did something with the bearings that I'm going to try to do with the shims as well, because I guess the carrier bearing, this is a pretty common problem. So let's go over the carrier here. This is the carrier that I'm not going to be putting in. This is the other one, but in this case, these are inner shims on the carrier bearings. They are between the bearing and the housing. And again, if I'm going to be adjusting backlash and taking shims on and off, I've got a tool to be able to do it, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to be putting all of that pressure on bearings multiple times as I'm taking them on and off. It's just going to be a recipe to damage something. So I have seen people recommend to use the old bearings, so ones that you pulled off the carrier, and then actually this isn't one of the carrier bearings, but grind out the center a little bit so that they are just a very light slip fit, and then you can try putting them on and off and adjust the shims and be in good shape. So I'm going to try and do that with this race as well. So what I've set up, I'm not sure how well this is going to work. I might have to try something else, but first thing I'm going to try is just something simple. I'm just going to get, I'm just going to try and sand enough off of the outside of that race and see if it'll go in. Now the nice thing is, because I took two axles apart, I've got two sets of bearings and races, so if I screw one up, I can just try something different and move on to the next one. So I'm going to try and set up old bearings and races so they're easy to take on and off, so I can adjust the backlash and pinion depth correctly. that took a few turns on the sanding drum there, and then I cleaned it off with this buffing wheel on the Dremel tool to make sure that I wouldn't be damaging the surface that it needs to sit in. And now I've got it all cleaned up, lathered up with gear oil, and with a little jiggling, as long as it's going straight down, it will go in. So it'll go in just fine, and with a little bit of back and forth, it'll come out. So I think that's good. That's how I'm going. This is now what I'm going to use to set up the pinion depth, and I'm going to do the same for the carrier bearings now, only remount the inside a little bit of those. So using that sanding drum worked pretty well. Here's one of the bearings. I've got it all gear oiled up, and yeah, it slides on. As long as it goes straight on, it slides on. And there's no slop. If it goes on at an angle, then it gets stuck. But anyway, I think that's going to be perfect for setting up the carrier bearings and the backlash. So the first thing I'm going to reinstall is the pinion outer bearing race. There's no shims behind this race at all. So we're going to install the new one. This is the old one that I'm going to use as a driver. But yeah, so we're going to put the new shim in there, and I'm going to drive it down actually with the old one. I'm just going to lay it on top of it. That'll just be the perfect size. And then I found in my U-joint installation and removal tool, I found this little guy. So because it does go down a little bit lower than this lip here, so I'm going to use this actually to drive it in. So that's the plan there. And before I do that though, I just wanted to clean out the surface. Just make sure that it's as clean as it can be. Oh wow, that worked perfectly. So, well, let me get it in first, and then I'll explain what I did. I think that's completely set in there. Just a little bit. Yep, that's set in there. So something that I've always done when I work on motorcycles, I didn't know how well it would work here, is put the races in the freezer just for a few minutes before I slide them in. That worked really nicely. You'd have to be careful though, because it changes the property of the race and it'll make it more brittle. So you don't want to hammer on it too hard, otherwise it might shatter on you. But yeah, that worked perfectly. Didn't really have to hit it at all. Perfect. So this is the pinion that I'm not going to be using. This bearing here doesn't have any shims behind it either. So I can install the new bearing on the pinion because I didn't have to make a sacrificial bearing that could come on and off. So that can be installed permanently. I've got the brand new Timken bearing here. So the idea that I've got, since it works so well with the race that we just put in, I've got the pinion in the freezer for a few minutes just to cool it down. We'll see how that works. But what I found was the tool that I purchased to remove these bearings that I showed earlier. This little tube on the tool really fits perfectly on the over the shaft and will be able to give me something to hit the bearing on the bearing itself and not on the carrier piece here. So yeah, that was just lucky. So I'm gonna use this now as a driver to drive the bearing on, but I don't know, maybe it'll just slide on like it did with the race. Okay, so we'll go get it out of the freezer and see how that works. All right, let's see how it goes. Yeah, perfect. All right, I cheated a little bit more. I'll tell you about that here in a second. But yeah, there you go. That went on beautifully. So I went to get, you can see there's some ice buildup on the pinion. The nice thing about the pinion is you're not gonna hurt the pinion. Even if you did have to knock the pinion, it's such a massive steel here that you wouldn't damage it. But what I did do is when I went upstairs to the freezer, I put the bearing in front of my heat gun on the low setting. It's got two settings, high and low. I put it on the low setting because I didn't want to do any damage if I was hitting it. I didn't want to take the chance of deforming anything. But I put it on the low setting, and so the bearing was hot, the pinion was cold, and it slid on like it was butter. Man, that was nice. Okay, pretty cool. You could use a hairdryer if you don't have a heat gun, but yeah, that worked beautifully. So just to remind you that I am using the gear set out of the axle that was in the truck. That seemed to be in better shape than the one that came in the axle that I purchased. So, you know, I am sure that the axles were made within a year of each other. I'm not sure what the manufacturing tolerance was, but because I'm changing the gear sets from one axle to another, I decided just to make sure that all the setup is correct with the gears. So where I'm going to start with is to put in the gears with all the shims that this gear set had in the axle that was in the truck. So I'm going to start with that. So I'm first looking at the pinion depth shims, and the pinion depth shims that came out of the truck are these, and then these over here. But like I said, they got damaged as I was knocking out the race, which is why I've made a race I can slide in and out easier as I'm testing things. So, but I've got a bunch of extra shims. These are shims that came out of the that were in the pinion in the axle that I purchased, and then the kit that I purchased had a bunch of new shims in them as well. So my plan is to measure each one of these and then select primarily from the new shims, but if I don't have one here, take one from the shims in the other axle and then add them up and use that as my starting point for pinion depth. All right, so the ones that that I need to replace are these ones, and there was a 25 thousandths, 3 25 thousandths and a 95 thousandths. So I needed 170 thousandths. These are all the ones that were in the kit, in the new kit, and there was a 95 thousandths and a 75 thousandths. So that's what I'm going to use. So I'm going to use these two to get the same total shim amount that the that it had stock. So that's what we're going to start with there. All right, let's do a trial fit of the pinion. So I've already put some of the depth shims in here. Here's the last one. This will get it to the, this is the amount of shims that the pinion had when I took it out of the other axle. This is the modified race, the one that I took some diameter off so that it would slide in and out easily as I adjust the depth. All right. I have pre-oiled up the bearings themselves. I put some gear oil on them so that they'll turn nicely when we're checking things out. So let's put our pinion in with the new bearing on it. Okay. Now, whoops. Okay, this is going to take multiple hands here. So, let's hold this in while I okay, this going to take some dexterity here. Actually, you know what I'll do? Let's go in here. And pull it out from this end. All right, fine. Now, let's put on the shims. These are the preload shims. Put the preload shims on that it had previously. I'm not using my new bearing yet. Just don't want to damage the new bearing, so I'm using one of the ones that I took out of the other axle. It looks perfectly fine, so we're going to use that for setting up the axle. Use this oil slinger, put that on. Slide the yoke in. Got the washer and the nut. Okay. just to tighten things up initially. Just do it by hand. It's biting up. Now I'm just going to take a break, make sure that I have put everything in the right order before I tighten everything else up. All right, let's tighten up this nut. So I was wondering how I was going to tighten this. I've seen people use crowbars and try to get leverage, but it's 250 foot-pounds. But there's quite a bit of variance that's allowed around that 250 foot-pounds. Anyway, I bought this fancy little thing. It is a 250 foot-pound torque tube. So my my air ratchet here, my impact can put out at least 250 foot-pounds. If you guys have ever gone to the Torque Test YouTube channel, this AirCat 1150 is on there, and they do some testing to see what the actual torque is. So it should limit it to 250 foot-pounds, and I'm pretty sure that's as accurate as anybody else is going to get without a lot of effort on my part. So let's give it a shot. Never used this before, so let's see what happens. Wow, it's pretty heavy, and it's quite long. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure how scientific that was, but that's definitely too tight too. Anyway. All right, so to decrease the preload, I have to add more shims. So my kit came with a whole bunch of new shims in with them, so I will add probably the thickest of the shims. I'll add this one in and just see what it does. All right. Okay. I'll have to knock that out a little bit. All right, let's try being gentle and then work our way up. That's not gonna work. There's a bit in there. So we'll just use this. There we go. Nice. All right, so we are going to add this shim and put it back in. Okay, let's try it with a little bit more, a little bit thicker set of shims in there. Just tighten it up a little bit before I put the torque tube on. That nut is really, it does take a while to, or it does take a little bit to get it on there. All right, let's tighten it up. Let's see what happens. Interesting. Well, that made a big difference. Much looser now. Let's just make sure it's fully tightened though. Yep, I'm not seeing it tighten anymore. All right, so that was quite a bit looser, so we need to be somewhere in between. So I'm not going to bore you with all the different trials that I make here, but I'm going to continue to... So this shim, the last shim that I put on, was too thick. So I'm going to measure the width of this shim and go down smaller and keep track of it, and I'll do some trials multiple times until I get the right torque on there. So I got pretty good at taking that pinion in and out, and I was playing with these shims. You can see I wrote down in the shims what sizes they were, and I used all different types of combinations, but I found one. Also, I put the new bearing in just to make sure that with the new bearing it wouldn't have a different reading. So now I've got 30 inch-pounds that way, and 30 inch-pounds that way. So that is absolutely perfect. Now we'll move on to the carrier, getting that set up. So getting the carrier in is going to be difficult. So the idea that I have is to rest it in there initially and then angle, and you'll see, I'll do this on video, but angle the yoke down and then use its weight to try and get it settled in. Maybe help a little bit with a dead blow hammer, but I'm hoping that I don't have to buy a case spreader to do it. So let's see if this idea works. All right. Since I think I'm going to have to take it in and out multiple times, I think I'm going to order up a case spreader to make it easier on myself. Nine. You know what? I think 9's gonna be it. Let's see if 9 will give us enough clearance. Before trying the grease idea, I just thought I'd change the orientation, see if I can slide it in this way, because this way I should be able to bump it in. So let's see if we can go in this way. Well, I might as well see if gravity can help me. So it's in there. Now let's just see. Let's get it centered in there and all the way in. There we go. I think that's even on both sides. Yep, a little bit of, just need a little bit of help. Perfect. All right, let's take the spreader off and then put the bearing caps on. I'm sure if I have to take it in and out a lot more, I'll get really quick and good with it, but this being the first time, it's taking a little longer. And then you'll see this just lifts off like that. So pretty easy. Nice. Okay, we'll get set up to put the bearing caps on. All right, got to make sure that the caps are going on correctly. So there's a W stamped here. There's one on this cap. So this one's going on right. Okay, so everything is just finger tight. Okay, now it's all finger tight. Okay, so these have got to be on at 80 foot-pounds. Just going to sneak up on it though. Just a little bit at a time. Okay, I think it's probably good now to try and tighten it all the way. All right, all at 80 foot-pounds. Now I can start to check how everything's sitting in there. So the first thing I'm going to do is check the backlash. Keep in mind I've got all the same shims in, the same size shims on the carrier that were in their stock, and the allowable is 6 to 10 thousandths. So if we look, we've got 9 thousandths, so that's good. And it does say to check in a few different places, so let's check. Let's check here. I'll just zero it out, make it easy on myself. So I'll make that 0. Here we've got 11. Okay, that's interesting. Nope. Yep, got it. There's at 1. There's at 12. Okay, well, let's check another location. So, oh. Well, that one I got 12. You know what? We're going to change out the shims and try and get it closer to 6. So I didn't need the spreader to get the carrier out initially, so either one of them, of the 2 axles. So I'm going to just try popping it out without the spreader. I've just put these in here and I'm trying to protect the edge of the axle. There we go, perfect. See how that just popped it out? So now I should be able to just lift it. Beautiful. Okay, well, that's why we did all that work with the bearings, so they'd come off very easily so that I could try putting different shims in. So let's try some different shims. So I need to move the carrier toward the pinion. So I need to take out some of the shim on the right side and put it on the left side to push it toward the pinion. So I just measured the different shims that I've got in there, and this one is 5.5 6 thousandths. Looks like it's 6 thousandths. So that should move me maybe 4 thousandths, or it should reduce my backlash by about 4 thousandths by moving this from the right to the left. So that's the plan here. All right, let's try the backlash now that we've moved one of the shims. So here we've got 6 thousandths, so that's perfect. Let's try a different location. Zero it out. Here we've got 4. That's 5 in the same location. Let me just get the service manual, see what it says. All right, so I can be between 0.04 and 0.09, but it doesn't want it to vary more than 0.02 between any points checked. And I had, I think, up to 7. All right, I'm gonna take a few more measurements on here just to confirm. I think my dial indicator is moving around a little bit. So I'm gonna try a few more times, but we've tightened it up a little bit, and I think it's now within spec. All right, so I've rotated it a few times. I put that towel on the bottom to create more tension on the pinion so that we could have more force between the ring gear and the pinion and hopefully be able to see the marks better. Rotated it 4 or 5 times each direction, and you can see the pattern. And again, I've read that you're really supposed to concentrate on the pattern on the coast side on the used gear sets. You know, let me move it up a little bit so it'll be a little easier to see. But you can see the pattern on there, the ones that have all of the compound on. So it's pretty easy to see the pattern. And what the pattern is telling me when I look at my handy chart is that the pinion is too close. It really looks a lot like that pattern right there. So the pinion is too close, so we're gonna have to adjust it. But that is exactly why I set this up, to be able to be taken apart easily. So we will take it apart and move the pinion out further and try it again. So in my experience, things rarely turn out exactly the way you expect. And this is certainly the case here. And this is actually one of the reasons that I love working in the garage, because I get to learn new things. So I have put in probably 4 different depth shims, pinion depth shims, trying to get a good pattern on the gears. and I wasn't getting anything that made a lot of sense to me, and I won't even bother showing them to you right now. So I decided I needed to get some help. And you know what I find interesting is, I don't know about a lot of you, but Facebook groups have become the new forums, and there's a Facebook group for everything. So I looked around and I found a group, this one right here, called the Gear Install Technical Group, and I joined them and posted some images of my gears, and also what I was getting, the gear marking compound. And you know, there were quite a few different recommendations, but one person looked at the clean gears, because I posted a picture of the clean gears and some of the wear marks in the clean gears, and said, you know, there is some wear on the teeth that you can see that probably is due to this these gears being run without fluid. So that he wasn't sure if these gears were any good. So I kind of went back to the drawing board, and if you remember, I put the different gear set out of this axle into here because I thought they were better. I'm changing my mind. So I'm going to use the ring gear and the pinion that came in this axle with the carrier that was in that one. So let me explain why. This is what came in the axle that I'm building right now. There is some rust on this tooth wheel here. This is for the ABS, which I don't actually use, but you still need it for the spacing, correct spacing of the ring gear. And then there's some rust up here. So what I've decided to do, but there's zero rust. You can't really see it because I've got it in here. There's zero rust on the ring gear itself, and the pinion itself looks really good. And you can see on the pinion, there's no wear marks on those teeth. So I am going to remove this ring gear here, and I'm going to install it on that carrier, and I'm going to use the pinion, this pinion, because this pinion and this ring gear are a set, and that will eliminate all the rust issues that I saw originally. Yeah, so I've already shown how I remove the bearing, so I won't show you how I remove that bearing. I'll just be using this tool again. So the only thing that I'll do, stuff that I haven't done before and that I haven't shown on this video yet, is I'll show how I'm going to attempt to remove the ring gear, put new ring gear on, get it torqued up. The first thing that I did though is I needed some way to hold the carrier. So I just, in my vise, just cut some pieces of wood that I had lying around and got them in the vise so that it's really solid. Because I'm going to zip these off with the impact, and then putting them back on, I have to look at the manual again, but I think it's like 120 foot-pounds or something, so it needs to be held pretty steadily. All right, so let's get that done. So I loosened one of these, which one? This one right here, to make sure that it didn't have reverse threads. So we've got one that's been loosened, and we'll just get the rest out, the impact. Yeah, they're pretty oily. We're gonna leave the rest on because in our case, we're changing everything because the toothed wheel here is rusty and the other one is in better shape. Cool. All right, so I'm not sure if I'm going to need to do some things. Probably. I'm gonna have to heat this up, maybe even put the carrier itself in the freezer because it's an interference fit. But I'm gonna check this out first. Maybe run a file over it just to make sure there's no high marks. So here's the gear that's in really good shape. And I don't know if it'll show up in the video, but if for the teeth that I clean the dirt off of, there's no impression in here of wear like there is in the other gear. So that's why we're changing it out. Okay, I'll come back once I've set up to, well, I'll take the other gear off without showing you since you've already seen this. And then when I'm ready to start reassembling, I'll start videotaping again. So I just thought I'd show this. I just zipped these loose and without, and the ring gear is just falling loose. So that other one over there that I was working on the bench, because of the rust, I think it was just the rust holding it in place, but it doesn't look like these are a slip fit. Yeah, it should go on very easily. So it's just gonna come right off. So the ring gear that I took off the other carrier, it slipped on here just by hand. I've got a couple of bolts in here to hold it in place for now. The service manual seems pretty adamant. It says to install new ring gear bolts. The other ones looked fine, but I thought, you know what? I'm doing it, so you might as well do it properly. So I picked up these Spicer ring gear bolts. So we're gonna put all new bolts in. So the way I'm gonna do it is just, we'll get them all in. We'll get them all in hand tight and then tightened with a wrench. And then one by one, I'll take them out, put some red thread locker on them, and then we'll torque them up. So that's the idea that I have. And nothing fancy. I mean, the biggest thing, I guess, on this is figuring out how you're gonna hold the carrier while you apply the torque. So the service manual says that for these grade 8 bolts, I need to torque it from 100 to 120 foot-pounds. So I've got the torque wrench set up for 110. So that should be good. Looks like I bought too many. 26. I thought I'd only bought 12. Interesting. Yeah, looks like there's 26 in that box. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Yeah, well, I've got extra. If anybody needs extra brand new ring bolts, let me know. Tighten them all up by hand. Bring that ring gear all the way up flush. Oh, we're going to do everything by hand. I'm not going to use any torque wrenching on this at all. I'm sorry, any impact wrench on this at all. Okay. Now I do want to make sure it's sitting nicely for when I torque it up. So I'm going to tighten it up here. Okay. I think that's good. All right, so now we'll take them out one by one, and then we'll torque them up one by one. Put some red thread locker on there. Now the test to see if my setup here, my vise, is going to hold for 120 foot-pounds. Should. Let's see. That's a lot of torque. Wow. All right. So what I'm going to do is, once I do one, I'm going to mark it with my Sharpie. That's done. And then I'm not going to bore you with the rest, but I'll just go across and do the rest of them. But yeah, that's a little bit, yeah, everything held up nicely, but I'm going to have to lean into it to get 120 foot-pounds on each of them. So I'm glad I have it being held solidly. So on this spindle that I'm going to be using, I noticed that, well, I took the bearing off with this, the tool that you saw me using before. I noticed that a couple of the threads at the end are a little damaged. So I picked up this, this die, which is 7/8 by 14 to clean up the threads. So put some cutting fluid on there. Don't need it really because we're just cleaning up the threads. We're not cutting new threads, but I wanted to make sure that when I was torquing it down, that we were getting the right torque. So yeah, so right there you can see that it's, well, I'm doing it by hand, so obviously they weren't that damaged. But here, this one's a little bit more damaged. Yeah, just a little bit. I think actually the nut probably would have cleaned it up itself, but nice to do it properly here. Beautiful. Okay, now we should get the right torque when we're tightening that guy up. Nice. All right, I think I've got it. So after I changed the ring gear and the pinion, the first setup looked like this, which told me that it was too close. So I took away 15 thousandths on the pinion depth, and it went here, which was too far. And so then I added 9 thousandths back, and got here. This one is a little goopy. I made the compound a little bit too thick and I put on too much, but you can kind of see what's going on. It didn't touch up here at all. It was just at the bottom. So I felt like I wanted just a little bit more on the bottom that I could see. So anyway, I kept track of this all in this spreadsheet. What the pinion depth was. I made sure each time that when I changed the preload that I had the right torque on the pinion. And then I actually got to a point where I was figuring out that for every 3 thousandths of pinion depth change, I needed to change 1 thousandths in the carrier, either from left to right, and that kept my backlash where it needed to be. And so now, with the most recent change, I've got a pattern. It's kind of hard to see in here. That looks like this, but it's going to be hard to see. But I've got, I've actually got marking compound on the top and the bottom. So it's actually got a pattern. It's hard to see on this, but I've got a pattern that doesn't look completely like, they call it a rising or setting sun. I've got an edge that has both sides on it. Anyway, so I think I am set up and it's time to put on the permanent bearings and shims and get it put back together. All right, it's time to start putting in all the new bearings as I do the final setup here. So the first one I'm going to put in is actually the race. This is the new bearing on that pinion, and it goes into this, the race that goes in this hole. Now, if you remember, what I did is I took some diameter off this race right here so that it could slide in the hole pretty easily. Yeah, well, I'll take my word for it. It does. Yeah, there you go. So it goes in pretty easily so that I could change the depth of the pinion, the shims, because the shims are right here. These are the shims. So I could change the shims with all the changes that I was making. So now I'm going to put the permanent new race in there. And actually, I'm going to use this race upside down on it because it fits just perfectly in that hole, obviously, since I've made it a little bit smaller. With this on top of it, and this as the driver. So this is going to be my driver setup, if you will, for that race. Now I could get lucky. I've got that race in the freezer right now to shrink it down a bit, and we'll get it in there. I probably will still set it in with this driver setup, but yeah, I'm gonna go get it out of the freezer and we'll bring it down and see how it goes. All right, here it is, nice and frosty. It is going to take a little bit of, that's a little bit of help to get in there. Okay, it went in. I'm not sure that it's seated. Get that right on it. There. I think we got it. Let's make sure here. I think a part of my rubber. Now it came off. All right. I think that's good. Awesome. You know, maybe we'll hit it with a real hammer just to make sure. All right, it's in there. Perfect. So before I mount the seal in here, I want to make sure just one more time that I do have the right preload set up. So I'm going to mount everything up without the seal and check the preload. Should be fine because I haven't changed anything since I checked it last, but just to make sure. Everything's all oiled up. I got some fresh oil all over the bearings that are going to be installed, and also on this washer to make sure that this isn't working against the torque that I'm going to be putting on it. So let's get this going. So I'll get that bearing in there. Got the oil slinger. Get the yoke. All right. Washer. And then the pinion nut. Okay, get some gloves on so I can hold this while we're ratcheting it in. So if you remember from when I did this before, I've got this 250 foot-pound torque tube. I think the biggest thing with this is you want to make sure that if you're using an impact, you don't have it too tight. Otherwise, you might tighten up on the bearing and damage the bearing. So if you're using the impact initially, you want to start with it loose or use sacrificial bearings, which is what I did initially. So I've got all new bearings since I did the very first setup a while back. Okay, I think I'm good. That's not going anymore. That's 250 foot-pounds. But let's measure it. Let's get all the pieces off of the impact. Well, I'm glad I checked it. It is too tight. I am just under 50. So, you know what we're going to do though, is one of the things that it says to do is to give a slight bonk when you've done this, just to make sure the bearings are set. Let's try that. Nothing too hard, otherwise you might damage something. Just a medium hit. But yeah, that, okay, well I'm glad I did that. We're going to adjust I'm going to adjust the preload. We're going to adjust the preload on this a little bit, and with the shims. So I've added a couple of thousandths to the preload, and now it is just under 40 inch-pounds. So that's at the upper end of the spec, which is fine. Now what I'm going to do over here is, before I put on the new bearings, I'm going to do one more trial fit with the modified bearings that slide on and off. One of the things I'm going to do though is I'm going to add 10 or 20 thousandths shim to each side to make it a lot tighter. So the carrier preload is supposed to be really about as tight as you can get it. To make it easier to take it in and out, I kept it a little loose, but for now I'm going to add about 20 thousandths to this, which should keep the backlash the same, because I'm going to add it to both sides. But I'm going to measure everything one more time before I put on the new bearing. So we'll add to both of these sets of shims, we'll add 10 or 20 thousandths to each side. I might, yeah, and see if I can get it in. Then we'll put on the permanent bearings and do the final, well actually I'm going to put it in, and then I'm going to check the gear marking one more time, make sure I still got good contact of the gears. All right, so it is time to, in theory, do the final installation. Now that I've got the pinion preload all perfect, I did adjust the shims a little bit more. Now I have 37 inch-pounds of preload, so we're going to get the seal installed. So this is a Spicer seal. The nice thing about it is you're supposed to put white lithium grease on the inside here to help so it doesn't bind when you're pushing the shaft through. But this came already greased up, so yeah, and it says it's got a lifetime warranty on it as well. But so that should be perfect. So let's get this going. First thing we're going to do is put in the stuff that goes in here, which is the bearing, the oil slinger. We'll get this going. I'm probably just going to do a little old school and just hammer it in. I do have this socket, which actually fits over quite nicely. Maybe I'll take a few stabs at it with this. That distributes the force a little better. Yeah, that worked out nice. Let's just make sure it is set in there. Okay, I think we're good. All right, next we will put in the pinion. Okay, let's get the pinion in. As you can see, the bearing is all oiled up. Let's get the yoke on. Now, I've been really working hard. This was not was new when I started, but it's been gone off, on and off so many times. It looks a little worse for wear, so I bought a brand new nut. I didn't need to do that, but whoops, just went flying. Let me go get it. Okay, so I'm going to put some Loctite on, not the permanent stuff, but the temporary thread locker. This is Loctite 243. It actually does a pretty good job even in the presence of oil. So I use this more than the other types of blue thread locker that are out there. Okay. All right, let's get that all cinched up. That feels good. I'm not going to check the torque because it's got the seal in there now, so it'll be different, but I did check it right before we put the seal on, so it should be good. So that's all installed. All right, now we're going to put the new carrier bearings on. I've got the shims on that gave me the right backlash. And what I'm going to do is use one of the temporary bearings that I had that was made to just slide over. I'm going to use that and then this as a driver to drive it on. I do have it sitting right now in front of the heat gun, so maybe it'll go on easily, I don't know, but we've got all the tools necessary in case we do have to help it a little bit. Yep, it's going to need some help. Let's see. We'll give it a little bit more help. This tool actually has an ability for me to use it on an air hammer. And I've never done that before. But that'd be kind of cool. So yeah, I'm going to actually pull out the air hammer and see if that helps. That worked really, really nicely. All right, well, the gears are all set up and back in. That did take quite a bit longer than I expected. But now that it's all done, I wanted to reflect a little bit on what made it easier once I got going. So here's a few things that just to remind myself and to recommend if I was to do it again, that I would do. So some tools that made it a lot easier were this carrier bearing remover that I showed in an earlier video. That made it really easy. I suppose you can do it with other methods, but that was pretty good. I really don't know if you're going to be changing the shims a lot. You'd have to, I guess you could keep the carrier really loose and take it in and out, but I use this each time, and it definitely worth the amount that I spent on it. Setting up the bearings so that I could slide them on and off the carrier, that worked really nicely. So I only put the final bearings on really right at the very end. Just to kind of finish this up, you've seen everything that I've done to put it all back in together. The only thing that I did differently this time is I did put some of the blue thread locker on here, just to make sure. And when I checked the backlash, it was between 7 and 8. Now, when I had the carrier loose, it would fluctuate sometimes more than 3 thousandths as I would try different areas. But now that it's all tight, it really fluctuated less than 1,000. So yeah, that was really nice. What else? Oh, the other thing is to keep really good notes. I started trying to do something like this on a whiteboard, and it just wasn't gonna work. So I set up a spreadsheet and kept track of everything so that I didn't get lost as I was trying different things. And I actually linked it on the side there to photos of the patterns. So I checked the pattern each time, and actually at the very end, so I've got it there for future reference. So, also really important to have good documentation. This is the manual for the Dodge truck that the axle came out of. So having this is really important. I also found this to be very helpful. I think I got it off their website. So USA Standard Gear Kit Installation Instructions. This is primarily for buying new ring gear and pinions from them, but I found it very useful. This kit was really nice. Had everything that I needed in it. I did buy an additional nut because I chewed up the one taking everything on and off a few times. Also, you need these. I use this one that you saw for checking the backlash, and this one I ended up using this setup for checking when I was expanding the case. So when I use the case expander here, or whatever it's called, case spreader, I use this on there to expand it. So you're going to need some of these. And other than that, oh, the other thing that I found really nice was having this 250 foot-pound torque tube, so that once I knew that I wasn't going to torque it up too tight, I used this to set my torque on the pinion. So next step is I'm going to take the backing plate and brakes off of this old axle. I'm going to do that because it has all the brake cable connected to it, where this one didn't come with any of the brake cables, the handbrake cables. So emergency brakes. So I'm going to be taking those apart and then putting the brakes on. I haven't decided if I'm going to do that. Probably I'm going to clean these up and then do it with the axle out of the car, out of the truck. But we'll see how that goes. That'll be the next video. All right, I hope you found this useful.